Thank you so much for joining us, the Voice of Job Seekers. Welcome back to the show. If you want to know more about the Voice of Job Seekers, the blog and the podcast, you can go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com. Of course, you can always download the podcast in iTunes, the Stitcher, or even iHeartRadio, which should be real easy for a lot of you who listen to music. You can just look for it there. Anyway, we're back with two of my favorite people. I want to welcome back Janine Truitt of TalentThinkInnovations.com.
Woo!
How are you?
You finally got it right. Thank you. I'm
I know. I had to write it 25 times in order for me to remember it so that I don't get called names again. So,
well, that was wise. That was wise, and I appreciate you.
Sure. And other than that, I highly respect you for all that you do and all the stuff. And by the way, I understand that you're going to be a regular contributor to collegerecruiter.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Good deal. And you're over there with my friend Alexandra Levitt.
Levitt, yeah, she's good people.
Yes, she is. She's been on the show 3 times.
Oh, wow.
She's a goodie. And also, welcome back to the show, Chris Fields of ResumeCrusade.com. How are you, sir?
I'm mourning Prince today.
Yeah, I know.
It's been a year.
I know.
Let me sing a little something for y'all just to get us in right.
No, you can't because there's copyright issues. Yeah.
Yeah, these folks will come get us. Thanks for having me on. I'm having a little fun, but yeah, thanks for having me back on the show.
Sure. Just a couple of show notes for some of you. I'm coming up on May 9th. We'll start a hiatus for the show for about 3 weeks, and then we'll begin back in June. And then from June until July 19th, we'll have 6 shows in succession, and then I'll be on my summer hiatus. However, that doesn't mean you stop going to the blog, because I'll actually be publishing more articles at that particular time. But I won't be publishing podcasts again until September. So keep those dates in mind, and I'll also have reminders in the show notes as well. So, to the panel at hand, I just want to ask you guys a simple question. Any particular news that you've seen recently that could be applied to careers and that careers should be aware of? Janine, can we start with you?
Sure. So it's not necessarily new, but it's just starting to get its legs here, and actually it's specific to New York. Mm-hmm. There was an executive order of sorts that was signed like the latter half of last year by Mayor Bill de Blasio. And what it's centered around is the idea that employers won't be able to actually ask job seekers for their salary history prior to making them an offer. Mm-hmm. So it's starting to get a lot of buzz now. And I guess the mindset behind the whole executive order was really to kind of level the playing field. And the hope is that, it helps with some of the pay equity stuff that we deal with specific to here in New York. Mm-hmm. So it's all a buzz right now. A lot of people are excited about it. Of course, employers aren't exactly happy about it. And I guess they're not happy about it, in my opinion, largely because it really requires HR departments and recruitment functions to function in a very different manner than they're accustomed to. Having worked a desk, I know when it comes to salary negotiations, really their whole goal is to get you, at the lowest place in that band, usually, unless you're like some sort of executive level person, then you may get over the mid and maybe closer to the max, but the goal is never ever to get you to the max. So, and they use knowing your salary history as a barometer for making those actual recommendations. So now when they don't know that information, for a lot of them, it's like, oh, well, we're flying blind. How are we going to know where to place them? And the reality is that it has nothing to do with where they were placed in whatever job. For all they were underpaid to begin with. Now they're going to have to really just deal with your worth. The job requires this, and this is what we understand the work to be worth, and this is what we understand your expertise to be worth. And they're going to have to actually be objective about how they're pricing people out. So it's exciting stuff. I'm glad that New York's on top of it, and I'm following it very closely. So
very cool. There's some other cities that are also have enacted that particular in one form or another. Few, not as many as there should be, although I'm afraid that will possibly change here, and probably will go back and forth in seeing different types of counteraction of laws and amendments that will follow. Chris, what you got?
Well, a couple things real quick. Last time we talked, I told you guys about how I was getting more involved in the tech community here in Memphis, and it just has enlightened me and kept me looking more into the integration of technology, robotics into the workforce. And I've been surprised to find out that it's happening now for just about every industry, even our beloved HR. There are bots that answer questions about things that are pretty stable and what am I trying to say? Structures of HR or questions in HR that are pretty standard. There are bots that answer those questions, but it's happening in every industry. So my point is, I do see where in the next 10 or 15 years, all of us will need to go back to school and learn more about technology and then how we can integrate it, and not just assume that it won't affect us because we do this or we do that and you need a human. Artificial intelligence is starting to learn and get better, and it's going to affect everybody. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I've noticed, we had a pretty bad job report for March, and they're predicting kind of dismal one for April right now. I mean, it could change in the next 10 days, but right now they're predicting that it might not be as stellar as it has been for the second consecutive month. And I think that is starting to be something that we need to pay attention to, all of us, if the job numbers keep dipping.
Yes, I can see that happening quite a bit, and I'm going to defer to Janine on this particular aspect of what you just said, Chris, only because that is a big part of what you look at, right, Janine?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So as far as artificial intelligence is concerned and how it will affect the workplace, being that, robots are beginning to take center stage, not taking over yet, how is I guess my question has always been in the back of my mind, and it's kind of a silly question. I go, oh, that's kind of an easy thing, but will there be a differential way of separating what's needed for humans and what's needed for automation?
Yeah, I think that's the struggle that everybody's having at the moment. I mean, keep in mind, I first started hearing about the AI stuff probably about 4 to 5 years ago. And as I sat in this room with whatever the dream team of people around the future of work, we all kind of sat back listening to a few of the speakers, looking at one another like, oh my God, humanity is going to die based on what we were hearing. But 4 years later now, watching it in application, I think it's less of a concern just at the moment. And all I'm really seeing is with these bots is they're just really helpful. It's really those real annoying kind of administrative tasks that I see companies kind of using AI to kind of jump in and help with. Now, granted, those administrative tasks once belonged to an administrative function, so there's something to be said for that. But in my experience, the people that had those jobs anyway were always, at least if you got a good person, they were always capable of so much more.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's an opportunity to leverage those people into other roles, the stuff that would actually be exciting for them, rather than just the mundane task. And so, I don't see it as such of a big deal if AI kind of steps in this realm. But to your initial point about where automation starts and ends and where humans jump in, I guess part of the moral and ethical discussion around this whole thing is because they're looking at this piece of technology to be what they call cognitive technology. Mm-hmm. The question becomes, to what degree do we attribute human attributes to these things? And, do we have to honor them in the same way that we do humans? Do the laws regulate them in the same way? Like where does that kind of divide? And because, they're trained to be, and they're created to be basically like a human, where it cumulatively learns what your wants, your needs, your concerns are. So it's human-like. And so I guess part of the discussion I've been hearing is, do they have rights? Like, is there going to be employment law that's going to govern what AI does for us in the same way that we do that for humans? So there are a lot of different discussions. And I guess the best way that I can put it is that where technology is concerned, to me, it's always been a facilitator, mm-hmm. and not the end all be all. And I think we get into a really dangerous spot when we say, okay, we expect this technology to swoop in and do this. It is there to enhance what we do, but I think we have to always keep in mind that there's a human touch that's still going to always be needed, especially where it comes to the workforce and dealing with people. So that's my position.
I agree with a lot of that. I think that what I've been learning is that we confuse robotics with AI. They're not necessarily the same thing. You do have robotics, and then you have AI, artificial intelligence, and there's an integration sometimes. But these robots are learning from each interaction. Think like Watson with Jeopardy. That robot now is doing some other things. So that was just a starting point when we saw that on Jeopardy for the Watson program. But I read this article about a AI help desk, where you call in and you're talking to a robot, and if the robot can't answer your question and it has to pass you to a human, it observes that interaction, and then the next time it can answer that question. So as it keeps evolving, you're going to need human. That's why I say we're going to have to go back to school, because you're going to need humans to program and to code. But some of these interactions are going to start being taken over, and especially in the next, like I said, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, you'll see it more often. We're starting to see it now with, Alexa. I love my Alexa app, but it really is, AI. And the more you use it, the smarter she gets. And I noticed, like, from when I first got it, and I would tell her to play something she didn't know, but after she figured out what I was telling her to play, or do, now I don't have to. She's mastered that learning curve, so now she knows what I'm talking about. And I was just reading where Google Home actually will recognize voices in the home. So even if you have multiple users. So it's not just robotics, it's also how it evolves and the intelligence of it. And I just think it's really fascinating. And I just don't want to assume that it will never hit what I'm doing. Like, there could be a resume writing robot at some point that can really put me out of business. So I gotta figure out what's going to be my next thing, and that's what I was talking to you guys about Colorado. But we'll talk about that later.
I just wanted to add something about AI that it just like kind of dropped on my head yesterday, and I was like, oh my god, this is cool. So I was in talks with somebody that I'm going to be doing business with, and they said to me, hey, set up time on my calendar. Amy will help you. So I get this email from, an Amy with a last name. And so I'm like, okay. And I just assumed that Amy was a person, except when I really read the email, Amy is like an AI personal assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just that, like right at that moment, I'm like, oh my God, this is an AI thing. And then it had the little link to it. It's like, if you need a personal assistant too, tap into this. So I don't know, pretty soon I might have to get me like an Amy or something. Like it was just because the language, the thing about it is that the language is so sophisticated and so normalized that like you don't even realize that this is not a real person that you're dealing with. And true to form, she carried out her tasks and he moved on and did whatever he needed to do. And so like to the point that I was making about just making really mundane things simpler, she made that whole process simpler because one, he didn't have to be involved in it. He handed it off to her and I just scheduled with her and, done and done.
You know what's cool about that? You made me remember. I know you remember this, and Mark, you might have too. But a few years ago, was it Microsoft that started their own automated Twitter account? Like it was, I forget the name of it. It was something like an Amy or Annie or something like that. It was an automated Twitter account, and people, well, basically, it shut it down because people taught it how to hate and how to be racist.
And
did you guys hear about that?
That was actually totally on my mind. Is that that some of the recent articles I've read have mentioned that just because it's going to be a robot doesn't mean you won't be able to teach it forms of hatred or forms of caring in that sense, as far as words and not particularly the touch.
And I know I'm talking too much. I'm sorry, but it's so fascinating to me. But going back even to the Alexa, when my friends come over, they try to teach it how to curse. She won't do it, but they try to. But I think it's interesting because I look at that and I think that's our society. We get a piece of technology and we immediately want us to do something bad or something, off center.
Well, in first thing when you test technology, a new piece of software, anything, the first thing you're trying to do is to see if you can initially break it, right?
Basically,
you're basically trying to push to see how far it will go, to see what its limitations are. And, we said we were going to try to keep a tighter rope on this show subject.
I will shut up. I'm sorry.
But no, we will have to revisit that in a future episode, along with the other piece of salary and how that's going to play into the future as we begin to ensue this battle, which is going to be of the employer against the employee. It is us against them. It's always been us against them, but this time it's going to be fought out a little bit more in court as to what's going to be the limits there. But mine is going to be weaved into our topic, the meat of our topic, and that's talking about the Beyonce Syndrome. And just recently, as young as yesterday, we heard about Serena Williams and her pregnancy, and how profoundly that she was able to, as the math has been done already, at this particular point, she's 20 weeks pregnant. And the math has been done in saying that she competed and won in Australia. She won a major in Australia while pregnant. Now, that is something we've never, ever seen before, honestly. And
but did you know she was pregnant then, though?
Well, yeah,
So,
and and honestly, if you want to break it down to science, the early parts of pregnancy are the most fragile, usually, for a lot of women. That early part where, you're watching, you're hoping that the baby survives that first trimester. Isn't that right, Janine? I mean,
I'm gonna, as the resident mother on the
yes,
panel, let me
please.
chime in. So yes, there's tons of memes, tons of posts being floating around about this, and I'm not saying it's not tremendous, but yes. So to your point, the early parts of pregnancy are extremely fragile. However, Serena Williams is a very active person.
She's a
And
superwoman. That's what I was gonna say. She's like not average. You can't
right,
really.
she's really active, and so one of the things that I know for sure is if you are a really active person, the doctors will often say to you, you can continue that level of activity throughout your pregnancy as long as you don't overdo it, because your body's accustomed to it. So, for instance, had she not been an active person, if she was just like somebody that went to an office every day and worked out once in a while, they wouldn't suggest that she would, try to go after like the Tour de France or, running some kind of 26-mile marathon because her body's not accustomed to it. So, I mean, in that way, I'm not trying to necessarily diminish what she did. I think it's tremendous, but at the same token, it's well within her realm of possibility and ability to do that kind of thing. Whereas for other women, it's not discounting them, that they couldn't be. It's just that they're just not Serena Williams. She is who she is, and she's active in the way that she's active. So I'm a little lukewarm on some of those posts that are floating around, like, Serena Williams won an Australian Open while she was pregnant. What are you doing today? It's like, really?
And that's part of the.
I think they should take her title from her. I agree with Trevor Noah. They should take her title away from her because technically that was a doubles match. She had two, and it was 2-1.
Yes.
They need to take that away from her.
But
I'm joking.
But that weaves into those last little tidbits. You were joking about it. But a stark reality is that's part of the Beyonce syndrome. In the fact you have a woman that can do it all. And the irony is that because of the bias that's in the workplace, that men want to benefit from that, but they don't want to acknowledge it through pay, through accolades, through promotions, etc. So
I want to ask Janine a question, and Janine, I kind of want to put you on the spot with this one. And so I have seen television shows, and I know that's television shows, and lady comedians, female comedians, who joked about how having it all is overrated, and you really can't have it all, and women need to stop trying to say that they can have it all. And when I see those things, I think to myself, oh my goodness, if a man had said that, what would happen? And what would the reaction be? So, you have to shut up about that. So, but my question to you is it realistic? Can a woman have it all in business, family, and the top title and the salary? We see Melissa Mayer try to juggle it, and that didn't work out too well, but I don't know if that has anything to do with her being a woman. But at any rate, just an example out there, can a woman really have it all?
It's there's levels of prioritization all the time, and I guess I used to think there was some kind of Shangri-La that you reach as a professional woman, that allows you to have this perfect scenario, and across the board I think it's 70-30, it's 60-40, some days it's 50-50, some days it feels like 100%. I don't know that if you really ask any woman who is juggling multiple responsibilities and priorities at the same time, that they'll tell you that, they're experiencing true, what they call work-life balance. And of course that it's also subjective. It depends on you, the person. There's some people that may just have just enough on their plate, and they figured out a way to make all of it kind of work in unison. But, personally, it hasn't been my experience that you can, have it so-called all, whatever that all is. I mean, for me, my all has been simplified to I run a business, I take care of my kids, and, trying to keep a hand on my overall well-being, which obviously offline, I talked about how I've effectively run myself into the ground. So essentially, no, I don't have it all. And I don't know that any one of us do, whether it's you're a female or a male. I think we're all always striving to get to a point of equilibrium, because that's where we really should be in all things. But do we achieve it every single day of every year? I don't know that that's realistic.
I
Well,
don't know. I
having
think
it
white
all
men
at
can have it
one.
all. I hate to play the race card, but looking at the White House right now, you can be rich, filthy, and not too smart, and still just be. I mean, so like they can have it all, but I don't know about the rest of us. I agree.
Well, I
Sorry
think
about
it
that, Mark.
depends on the definition of what that person calls having it all,
Hmm.
because
True.
the levels vary. But I don't know if anybody can have it all at one time, or whatever it
Right.
is. If but if you kept life really simple to two or three things that are must haves, you probably could. But I think it's sort of, if we were looking at what people look at Beyonce and say you can be rich, beautiful, talented, um, savvy, uh, caring, family, all that. Right now, the perception is that she has it all, but that's not what every person or even every woman wants in that way, much less being able to have that all at the same time. Because having it all like that also comes with other emotional packages that aren't so attractive. Pressure. She still has to work for a record company. She has promoters to please. She has a brand that she has to keep. And all those things are not particularly easy. So, I think the thing that we've kind of bounced around while we were throwing emails back and forth is just trying to understand where is the line. Um, where is the line between being aggressive or um, being aggressive on the job, or not being as aggressive to the point to where it invites bias? Quite honestly, there's no other way for me to even put that. But what are you guys' thoughts as far as, you know, if there is a line, where do you draw it, and does it look differently for other people?
Oh, I'll
Chris?
start. Oh,
Oh,
go
Go ahead,
ahead.
Chris. I'll let you start since I cut him off earlier.
what's up? I'm sorry. So that's a very good point about having it all being relative. There are people who are motivated to do more. There are people who are content with what they have. There are people who don't really want much or desire much. So that is a very good point about it being relative. I think when I think about the Beyonce syndrome, I think a lot of times we all tend to think that we are the very best at what we do and there's nobody better. And then we don't make room for the fact that there are people who are, outperforming you or doing better, or there's something else that you can learn from someone else. And I think what becomes a little dangerous is that in our quest to have it all, we forget about the amount of work it takes to get it all. And then when you are faced with the amount of work you need to do, it becomes overwhelming. And no disrespect to Beyonce. I believe she does whatever it is she does. She does her thing, but it is also a little bit generational. Her greatness. I think some people don't think she's as great as some young people who may think that she's really great, or some people who are not in that world. But correlating that to our conversation, I think you have to always think about greatness in a relative aspect of what you're doing, and then ask yourself, are you really doing great work, or are you doing mediocre work and trying to mask it as greatness? So it is a very subjective and relative conversation to have with yourself and with others.
Janine?
Well, I guess to speak on the whole aggressive versus assertive thing, I do think that it matters who you are. At least it's been my experience that there's never a place for a Black woman or a Black male in the workplace to be aggressive under any circumstance, quite frankly. Because there's already an assumption when we walk in the door and when we're employed with anybody that that's part of our pedigree anyway.
Get your hand out of the pocket.
You have to, as a Black professional, you have to always be polite and nice and, tempered in your responses, and always be thinking about how the delivery will be received, which, apparently we're supposed to have a crystal ball for this kind of thing. But that's been my experience. The second you speak up, it's whether you're saying it in an aggressive manner or not, you are by proxy being aggressive. So even in being assertive, which is supposed to be like the better way of delivering a message rather than coming off completely combative, even in those situations, as a Black professional, you are deemed as being angry, aggressive, and the like. I've witnessed many times over my white counterparts being what I would think and what most reasonable people would think, clearly combative and aggressive. And it's, kind of diffused to, oh, well, they were just angry in the moment, or, hey, let's walk away and cool down, with no repercussions for the behavior, where, like I said, by a reasonable person's standard, it would be seen as insubordination and a bevy of things across the board. And it's diffused down. You take a Black person and put that in a similar situation, and suddenly it's grounds for a performance plan and write-ups up to and including termination, etc. So there's definitely a double standard out there across the board. I have no problem hanging my hat on it because I've seen it. I've been in the position. I've been called the angry Black woman on the job, even when it's not even in my nature whatsoever to be aggressive, let alone combative. I was just, maybe speaking up and speaking my mind, and yeah, that certainly needs to change.
I have to tell a story real quick. That was great. That was perfect, and it just took me back to a time where let me make it fast. So I was a corporate trainer, and I know on this show you're not allowed to do profanity, but in my classroom I would use profanity in a joking way. Never aimed at anybody, just lightheartedness, break up the monotony. And one day my manager, she came to me. She said, "I need to talk to you after work today." So she said, "Hey, look, there was a complaint about you being angry and cursing in class." And I'm like, "Hey," I'm not gonna say her name. I was like, "Hey, Jane, that's not me." She's like, "Yeah, I know." She said, "Listen, so don't get upset because I know you. I know that's not you." So what I did over the last 2 weeks is I listened outside of your training room throughout the day. I would just stop and listen. She's like, "And I heard you use a couple words, but it was all a humor and everybody was laughing." She said, "But you have to remember, you're a big Black man." And this was a white woman talking to me. She said, you're a big Black man. And sometimes people are going to perceive what you say aggressively. So just understand that. And I never used profanity in my classroom in any kind of way after that. But the funny thing was, my training mate, friend of mine who had a room next door to mine, he would curse like a sailor with a broke back in the rain. And in all types of ways, use everything. And it wouldn't always just be for humor. Never got a complaint. And I knew then that there were just some things in life that I can't do that other people can do. And I just made my peace with it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to kind of add something too. I mean, in that realm, we want to bring that even more current than that experience. And Chris, this is true. When we talk about our ecosystem that we all play in terms of, these HR online personalities, whatever you want to call it, thought leaders, having been on the speaker circuit in the past few years and watching what's accepted from white speakers versus me as a Black speaker, similar to what Chris just described, I see several of our counterparts on stage thinking that it's a value add or cute or whatever it is to be cursing from the podium, or using, examples that aren't exactly what I would think are, suitable for a business setting.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you will see them hand over fist getting these bigger and bigger opportunities to do more and more with more money on the table. Meanwhile, those of us who are really trying to pack the value, sans all of that stuff, and being really mindful of things like not cursing from the podium, not selling from the podium, all the things that we get told as speakers. And not so much that the opportunities aren't there, but it's not that we're not getting the same level of opportunities as those that aren't packing the value and are doing just whatever they want when they want. So it's pervasive in a number of different areas, and there's nobody that can deny that.
If I can
Janine,
jump in,
why you want to open that can of worms? I have a lot to say about that particular topic, and also just this social thing we play in, because you and I have to work twice as hard to get whatever recognition that we get. I've been doing this now for 6 years. You've been doing it for a number of years too, 5 or 6. Mark, you've been doing your thing, and it really is amazing, like how hard and how Chris Rock told this great joke about how he had to host the Oscars to buy a house, and there's a doctor that lives next to him, a regular old pull your tooth doctor. It's the same thing. Like, I have to do all this stuff and get recognized by whatever before someone gives me the same credit that somebody else who does little to no work or get little or no recognition, and they're able to do it. But again, not that it's okay.
We're going into area that I have been talking about publicly in articles and in speaking, what we call unconscious bias. It perfectly plays right into my area of training these days, and I tell you, I'm going to pull back the discussion a little bit here because we're kind of flying into one zone, but we created this other zone that we're trying to discover, and both zones are kind of fine, but we only have so much time. So, I think
Janine, will you stop talking?
I'm sorry. I had to just get that one in there.
The target is just, how are people able to create a better workplace, or to knowing where they can draw the line, and finding out how they can navigate the workplace because it's hard to get to a workplace, for one. Yeah, just to be frank, if for all of us. It's even harder for those who are of color. If you're a woman and you're a woman of color, you've got 2 strikes against you, perceivably. And I know a lot of our white colleagues and other colleagues don't like us talking about this like this, but there's a reality that sets in here. And one of the cliches that's often, it's not a cliche, it's really a truth, is that we have to work harder to get what is average for someone else. You know what I mean? That others can go beyond those and break those rules, and it's okay. And if you're a person of color, it's not okay, and you got to stay in these boundaries. But if someone goes outside the box, then they're perceived as being exceptional, when you could have gone outside the box too, but you were told to keep in these rules. And I think that's one of the points here, is that when you go to a workplace and you're told that these are the boundaries, and you go outside those boundaries, what part becomes fair and what part becomes foul?
I have a great story.
Does that make sense at all?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that perfect sense.
And it reminded me. So I want to tell you guys this story, and it relates back to our topic of the Beyonce syndrome. It really does. So recently, I was hired by this black lady to help her apply for a head coaching job at a small community college. And so we're working on the project, and then she needed a PowerPoint, and we're working on it. And she tells me, "I've been told I already have the job, so you don't have to worry too much about this." But that didn't sit right to me. So I said, "You know what? We're not going to take anything for granted." So we put the PowerPoint together, and I was looking at it, and I was going over it in my mind, and I said, "You know what? Right now it's a great story, but I feel like it doesn't have enough about the analytics. So I feel like if somebody were to do, like somebody she was going up against were to have a presentation, they talk more about the basketball X's and O's, that the person watching might say, oh, you know what? Well, Jackie's didn't have that, and Beth's did, and I like Beth's a little bit." So we put that in there. So I called Jackie. I said, "Hey, look, I added a couple of slides about analysis." She was like, "Okay, but why?" I said, "Because I just don't want anybody to think that you got this job in the bag only because of X, Y, and Z. I want to make sure that we cover all the bases." And so what I was telling her, and I told her flat out, I said, "I know that they said that this is your job to lose, but I want to nail it. I want them to have no excuse not to give you this job. So let's do these X's and O's part." And in my mind, I was thinking, I think you're Beyonce, but somebody else might not. So I want to make sure that they know that you're Beyonce or Serena Williams or Prince or whomever. I want them to know that you're the best, and and not only do you deserve this job, you can do this job. Like, you have earned the right. So that, tying into what you were saying about knowing and doing and working twice as hard as the next person, and then not taking for granted certain things that we sometimes tend to. But I had to share that story with you guys because I thought about you guys when I was doing that project.
Janine?
So I'll start off by saying that none of it is fair with regard to what you talked about. But I guess what I've kind of settled down with in my head is that while it's not fair and we've got to continue to fight that battle, in the interim, you've got to be focused on how you help yourself.
Mm.
And part of how I've decided to help myself all along was really to color outside of those lines, outside of that box anyway. So, that's not conventional advice, of course, but what that's helped me do in terms of my career, in terms of just taking on things that I knew wasn't really in my job description, was just understanding that in the long term, I would have many more gains than not. So you can obviously decide to go to any given job and do exactly what they tell you to do. And in a lot of respects, that's actually applauded, especially when you're a Black professional. They'll actually raise you a few bumps, so long as you keep your head down and keep your mouth shut. So there's something to be said for that. And if that's the way you want to go about it, then by all means. But in terms of building up your repertoire, in terms of building up your skills and learning more, so that eventually down the line, you've got a body of work and a reputation for doing really great things and a great many things, which is, we all know where everything is headed in the workforce. It's not about being monochromatic or being linear in terms of what you can do. It's about, how many little bits and pieces you can bring together to really maximize how much of an asset you are to a company. So for me, it was always about, yes, of course, covering my bases in terms of doing what I was called to do or what I was hired to do. But it was also about picking up those little added extras that I knew was going to make me marketable in the future. Whether or not it boded well for me within that company didn't really matter to me in the long run. It was, what's the long-term gain?
Yes, and we're going to probably have to continue this discussion on another episode, because I think once we got started on one road, I think we instead of going to California, we're going right to Mexico.
That's my fault.
And you know
And
what?
mine.
That's the beauty of podcasts. There aren't any particular rules. So, having said that, we have just a couple of minutes left. Janine, what are you working on that the people need to know about?
As per usual, I am going to be pushing my growth on my terms is taking on fabulously this whole concept of redefining success, and highlighting people that I feel are doing great things, and also kind of doing it in a way where they're not, directly focused on things like money and luxury and all this stuff that seems to be clouding the airwaves right now. Not that they're not great, but I just really wanted to be in a position to highlight the stories and the people who are looking at success from a real place, and what that climb is like and what the struggle's like. So in any event, Growth on My Terms is on IG. I've been actively taking features. In fact, Mr. Mark Dyson will be featured soon, so I'm excited about that. But if you're interested, you should definitely check out bit.ly/growth on my terms feature if you think that you're somebody that would love to share your story with my community. So that's where I'll leave it.
Good deal. Chris, short time.
There should be something coming out really soon. I've been approached by a major job resource to be an approved resume writer for them, and that should be coming out pretty soon. I could talk more about that, and I'm pretty excited about that. I think, Janine, I thought about you because one of my clients called me. She said, "Man, was you on Oprah.com?" And I said, like 3 years ago. And she said, "I just got a thing in the mail from them." And I guess they reran it through their subscription service or something. And she said, "I got this thing in the mail, and my email, I'm reading, and I see your name, and I almost start choking on my coffee." So it was pretty cool. But anyway, so there may be some people who subscribe to Oprah that may see that. But that actually happened 3 years ago, April of 2014, which is amazing. It's been that long. But the next big thing is that announcement that should be coming out about me working with a major job resource, and I'm pretty excited about that too. So things are going well right now.
Good deal. Love it. Love it when, you know, getting an advantage of some sort, or being able to be recognized in that kind of way. So that's kind of cool. I've got a bunch of things, and I was just trying to narrow it down to just one.
Well,
Um,
let me ask you so it doesn't sound self-serving. Hey, Mark, what do you got going on?
um, I'm going to defer to a great post, um, not because I wrote it, but because the discussion happened. Um, I was talking with Jessica Dillard, who has been a long time resume writer, who has a firm that works with companies and individuals, and not just writing resumes, but also coaching and all. We had a great discussion that I posted on the blog today. So I invite you to go to voiceofjobseekers.com and look for where we talk about a handbill, which was a very intriguing discussion. I'm not going to say any more about that, but it's something that everybody should want to use for their job search strategy. If you really want to set more eyes on you and be fixated on your abilities, that's a strategy you should use. So look for the one about handbill, and that's all I'm going to say about that. In the meantime, thank you, Janine and Chris, for joining us
Thank you.
today.
Thank you.
And we will probably have another one in a month, so you guys can look forward to that. In the meantime, thank you all for joining us, the Voice of Job Seekers. Be sure you look to iTunes to write a review. If not, just let us know what you think of the show. So we talked about it. I know that this one may be a little interesting to some than others, but nevertheless, look forward to seeing you next week. And don't forget that after May 9th, I won't produce another show until June. So see you next week, though. Have a great day and have a great week.